The Old Testament lectionary text for today is from Genesis chapter 21, verses 8 through 21. And I will be reading from the Common English Bible. And this story starts in the middle of a story. So this passage starts in the middle of a story. So when I start to read, you've got to have a little bit of context. This is the story of the matriarchs and the patriarchs. This is the story of Abraham and Sarah, who we know used to be called Abram and Sarai. It's the story of their household, of a servant among them who lived with them and who bore a child to Abraham. So here's the story. The boy grew and stopped nursing. On the day he stopped nursing, Abraham prepared a huge banquet. Sarah saw Hagar's son laughing, the one Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham. So she said to Abraham, "Send this servant away with her son. This servant's son won't share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." This upset Abraham terribly because the boy was his son. God said to Abraham, "Don't be upset about the boy and your servant. Do everything Sarah tells you to do because your descendants will be traced through Isaac. But I will make of your servant's son a great nation too, because he is also your descendant." Abraham got up early in the morning, took some bread and a flask of water, and gave it to Hagar. He put the boy in her shoulder sling and sent her away. She left and wandered through the desert near Beersheba. Finally, the water in the flask ran out, and she put the boy down under one of the desert shrubs. She walked away from him about as far as a bow shot and sat down, telling herself, "I can't bear to see the boy die." She sat at a distance, cried out in grief, and wept. God heard the boy's cries, and God's messenger called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "Hagar, what's wrong? Don't be afraid. God has heard the boy's cries over there. Get up, pick up the boy, take him by the hand, because I will make of him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well. She went over, filled the flask, and gave the boy a drink. God remained with the boy. He grew up, lived in the desert, and became an expert archer. He lived in the Paran desert, and his mother found him an Egyptian wife. Here ends the reading of this passage, right in the middle of a story. The painting for today is entitled "Clear Vision." And it is from Lauren Wright Pittman. But I don't know where it is. It's not here. It was in the narthex. We colored it on the 2 Thursdays ago. But the artist says that Hagar has every reason to feel that God has abandoned her. But she still cries out in the wilderness and asks God not to let her look on the death of her child. She's not asking for much. All she's asking for is for God to hold back the tragedy from her. But God opens her eyes, and she finds a well of water and nourishes her son. She nourishes a great nation. She carries the weight of a nation on her shoulders. And the artist says, "For me, Hagar is an icon of strength and sustenance in those dry desert places. She is a well for her son and for many. In the image, her hair waves become the well water that keeps Ishmael alive. Her eyes are saturated and full. holding the grace that God so freely offered her, the grace that humanity withheld from her. The pattern of her garments echo her clear vision. And the many people of the great nation she holds shimmer around Ishmael's face like countless stars in the sky. You see in this story what human insecurity and jealousy reject. God protects. When human fears project scarcity, God provides. Hagar's salvation, that well of water, is just around the corner. And God shows her where it is, and she and her son are saved. It got so bad that she gave up hope. And she set her child under a bush, out of sight, so she didn't have to watch him die. Out in the middle of the desert, wondering where they were to go when the water ran out. And they hadn't reached any safe place for nourishment or any kind of civilization at all. So she gives in to the tragedy. Because she's already been diminished by Sarah and Abraham. Abraham, who follows Sarah's instructions to dismiss her, she might have thought she deserved this fate. Maybe others around them would feel the same way. But God disagrees. God has other plans for Hagar and her son Ishmael. God will not let either of them die in the wilderness. The world may have given up on her, and she may even have given up on herself, but God does not give up on her. But, as one commentator noted, this story is only made worse by its larger context. So the story of this servant in Abraham's household and how she became pregnant with Abraham's oldest son and what happened between her and Sarah is worse than what I just read. When viewed within the context of the rest of the scripture, this story is full of half-hearted faith, hedging their bets, and cruel treatment of one another. It is what scholars call problematic. I just think that's not an effective enough word, but that's the word we use. Hagar's an Egyptian servant woman who belongs to Abram's wife, Sarai. This is back in chapter 16. Since Sarai cannot conceive, she gives Hagar to Abram as a wife, so that she may have children through Hagar. This is straight out of Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale concept. You know, it's not her concept. She adopted it from this place in the Bible and other places where the handmaiden of a wife can be a surrogate parent to carry the child when she can't. So Sarai takes the initiative to give her handmaiden to Abram so that she, basically the enslaved Hagar with no decision of her own, so that she might conceive on Sarah's behalf. So it's Sarai's plan all along. It was her idea. But then something changes. After Hagar conceives, Sarah perceives a change in Hagar, who, and this is a quote directly from chapter 16, looked with contempt on her mistress. You see, Hagar's pregnancy had elevated her status in the family as she is carrying Abram's only son. Sarai complains to Abram, who permits Sarai to do as she pleases with Hagar. And the scripture says she dealt harshly with Hagar. And even the Hebrew word dealt harshly is the same word that is used in sort of a reversal of roles to describe the way the Egyptians treated the Israelites in the next book of the Bible, in Exodus. Remember the slavery in Egypt? So Sarah seeks to knock her down a peg. And instead of working it out between the two of them, she goes to Abram. And he punts it back to her, to Sarai. So now she has new or renewed authority over Hagar and treats her harshly. This is kind of a reversal. Hagar's the Egyptian, and Sarai's the ancestor of the Israelites. But Hagar responds to Sarai's harsh treatment like any of us would. What does she do? For those of you who know the Bible, she runs away. Wouldn't you run away? But being seen by God in the wilderness to which she fled, she returns on God's advice. God said, you need to go back. What? Back there? Returns to Abram's household, and Ishmael is born. Which brings us to the story for today. Well, almost. There's more. In between chapters, God renamed Abram, Abraham. Sarai becomes Sarah. There's a story of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's a whole thing about Abraham pretending that Sarah is his sister, and all kinds of drama ensues from that. These are not excellent people making really good choices. But then Isaac is born. Remember back in chapter 12 when God said, I will make a great nation of you? And Abraham, we think about how faithful he was to leave his home and everything. I almost imagine Abraham saying, yeah, right. So Ishmael is no longer the son when Isaac is born. He's born right before the passage. In fact, in the very beginning when I said, and the boy stopped nursing, that's the boy. Isaac's the boy who stopped nursing. He's the toddler in the story. As soon as God's promises are fulfilled, human frailty gets in the way. Jealousy, contempt, and this fear of scarcity, that there aren't enough promises or God's greatness and goodness is not enough to go around. There's grasping. Regarding the concept of Ishmael, Hagar, his mother, has neither choice nor voice in any of this. She is taken and given to Abraham as a wife. And we, as people reading this today, would be at a disadvantage were we not to be fully aware of how absolutely vulnerable Hagar is in this situation. She has no powers or rights. Neither Abram nor Sarai call her by her name even. She is not named by anybody but, oh, wait. Who calls her by name? God. We know her name because God says to her in the wilderness, Hagar, what's wrong? The whole story of Hagar is, like the scholars say, problematic. And what is problematic about it is not how the human patriarch and matriarch mistreat her, but how God, at certain intervals, seems to be okay with it. Namely, sending Hagar back to Abram's household and then advising Abraham to listen to his angry wife when she wants to dismiss her. So which is it, God? She goes into the wilderness to flee the harsh treatment. You send her back. Then she's in the household, and Sarah's done with her, so she wants to send her out, and God says, okay, go ahead, listen to your wife, do what she says. Should Hagar stay, or should she go? Or is her time just up? The scripture says, this passage is before this, that Ishmael is 13 years old when he and his father, Abraham, are circumcised as a symbol of the covenant. So he's not a baby. I think it's laughable that, it's not in the Hebrew that he was a child put into a sling over her shoulder, because he had to have been a teenager at this point. He's not a baby. Isaac is a toddler. Ishmael is a teen. But I wonder what changed. It's not a good idea to deliver a baby in the wilderness, so I'll give God the benefit of the doubt for that one. Was God more concerned about wilderness infant mortality rates? Maybe. Was Hagar happy at first to be leaving? In this passage from today, to be set free from the dominance of Sarah. But here she is in that same wilderness, and now she has a family. She once fled to this wilderness willingly, and now she's been sent away. And she is like to give up until God visits her again. She doesn't ask for much. She just wants to avoid witnessing her son's death. But God has other plans for Ishmael, and God has plans for Hagar. God hears this time. So before, when she was in the wilderness, God saw her. This time, God hears Ishmael, the child, hears his cries, and intervenes to save them both. This story is only made worse by its larger context. Hagar is continually mistreated. Sarah is the instigator. Abraham is sort of the person that lets it happen. Also, God, in some instances, lets it happen as well. But the whole situation exists because Abraham and Sarah are hedging their bets all along. They are not too sure. They're just in case. Act 1. God tells Abraham, leave your home and family, and he goes. He does. We celebrated him for that in chapter 12. But he brings his brother-in-law Lot and that whole family just in case. Leave your home and family, but, you can bring your brother-in-law, your wife, whoever. Act 2. He tells people his wife is his sister to escape getting killed. Just in case. All this bad stuff falls on Abimelech when he takes Sarah as his wife, and God's unhappy with that. Then Act 3. When no children are born, Sarai sends her handmaiden as a surrogate, just in case. Act 4. Now that I have my own son, they can go. Let's have them leave, just in case they submit a claim to launch a campaign to split Isaac's inheritance. And that's the reason. That's the reason Scripture gives us. We can interpret a whole bunch of different reasons, but the Scripture says that Sarah was concerned about Isaac having to split his inheritance. Didn't want that to happen, so send them away. These are people who are consumed with the fear of scarcity, but you and I don't know anything about that. They simply don't believe there is enough to go around. God's promises in actuality are multiplied through these two sons of Abraham. But they can't see that. They can't see that then. God has told them what would happen, but they can't imagine it. They cannot conceive of it. And maybe that's the message for us today. Are we hedging our bets? Are we holding on to the promises, or are we just in case? And the thing about the just in case is, none of us would argue about being really responsible and saving and security and all that stuff. But the thing is, the just in case stuff gets them in trouble. You know what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot? Hello? Abraham brought him with him. He said, leave your family and go into the land in which I will show you. And he brought him. Didn't leave him. All these problems stem from them hedging their bets and trying to secure a future for themselves on their own, not believing in God's promises. They might deal harshly with her, but God has other plans for Hagar and her son Ishmael, and God will not let them die in that wilderness. They may understand that the world had given up, but God does not give up. What human insecurity and jealousy reject, God protects. When humans fear scarcity, when they project scarcity on situations before it even happens, this is what Sarah's doing, God provides. Maybe this story in Genesis will direct our attention to a greater awareness that God's economy of grace is abounding and unlimited. In other words, there's enough. There's enough. Amen.